It had been a long, uncomfortable, rough trip. When they finally got to the quaint little town of Bethlehem, they found it just overrun with people. Bethlehem was typically a quiet, tiny little place. A few hundred people was all. But this census had made everybody go back to the place of their lineage, and Bethlehem was crammed with people. Something tells me there were people lined up on the streets. And I had always thought that Mary and Joseph were probably in the stable, which was more than likely a cave, by themselves. I don't know why I always thought that. The text doesn't say that. All the text says is that there was no room in the inn. Something tells me there were a lot of people in that stable that night. Something tells me Mary and Joseph weren't the only ones who didn't get a room in the inn. I have a feeling it was kind of cramped. When I think about that, I think about the time Betty and Lewis and I went to the emergency room in Duke. You're talking about a place, we weren't the only ones there that night either. And in fact, there were so many people that not everybody, once you go back to triage, got their own little room back there. There was a whole nother waiting room back there. There were so many people. Something tells me there were so many people in Bethlehem that night that every stable was full. It wasn't much. I have a feeling the inn in Bethlehem wasn't much either, though. But it was a place out of the weather. It was a place that had a little hay. And there they were. I can picture the scene as Joseph brings this very pregnant woman. And everybody's saying, how long have y'all been married? Oh, you're just engaged. Oh, okay. I can see the eyes rolling. I can imagine Mary wanting to say yes, but this baby's going to be God. And I imagine her thinking, well, I won't even try it. They'd never believe it anyway. But that phrase, no room in the inn, I think that's the phrase that really jumps off the page at me for the Christmas season. The first Christmas play I ever remember, I was the innkeeper. And it was my job to say, there's no room in the inn. That was the same night I was a little drummer boy. No room in the inn. I wonder today, is there room for Christ in our Christmas? Sometimes I think our Christmases are so busy that we do everything but really worship the one that Christmas is all about. Kind of like a legend I heard about the emperor in India who had the Taj Mahal built. It was built in memory of his second wife. We know it as the magnificent, wonderful Taj Mahal. But the legend says that the emperor wanted the temple as a dramatic symbol of the love he had for his wife. And he wanted her coffin to be right in the center of the large parcel of land. And the temple was to be constructed around it. Well, as the time progressed, you know how building a building can be. Something tells me they had a construction company, probably like OK Construction, and you couldn't depend on them. They was probably running behind or off in vacation in ancient Dolly World or something like that. But one night he went walking through the temple, and he accidentally bumped his leg against a wooden box. He was irritated. Impatiently, he brushed the dust off of his leg. He ordered the workers to throw the box out. The box was containing his late wife. He was so busy doing something for her, and in the process, he had her thrown out. I'm concerned that at Christmas time we do the same thing. We think about Mary and Joseph. We make sure the manger scene's perfect. We make sure the tree looks good. We make sure all the Christmas cards are sent. We make sure every bit of food is perfect, not burnt, not undercooked. And we make time for everything except remembering the one that Christmas is all about. The good news is, it was in the midst of a busy, rustling town that Jesus came into this world for busy people. Sometimes also I think, sometimes our heart grows cold at Christmas. It's easy. At Christmas we think about helping everybody. We think about the underprivileged. We think, well, we ought to give this to this person. We ought to give that to that person. And then we go back and we think, well, they're probably on food stamps. They're probably on welfare. Well, they're just working the system. They're just doing this. They're just doing that. And it's really easy to let our hearts grow cold. I read a story that touched me. It was in the Christian Century years ago. Harriet Ritchie wrote it. And it was about her family's life that night on Christmas Eve. The story says that they had attended their church's late night Christmas Eve service. After the service, they were hungry. So they were searching for a place to have a late night Christmas Eve breakfast. There was only one place they could find that was open. It was a little truck stop nearby the interstate. A few big diesels were rumbling outside. Inside there were a few truckers sitting at a counter. A jukebox played a country song that went something like this: "When you leave, walk out backwards so I'll think you're coming in." On the front window, there was a multicolored blinking light. The place smelled like bacon grease and stale cigar smoke. A one-armed man was behind the counter. The family squeezed into a booth. A thin waitress named Rita came over. She managed a weary smile and handed them their menus. Harriet looked around. She felt a little bit out of place, she says. Her family had just come from a beautiful Christmas Eve service, and they would be heading to their lovely home for the night. They would be in their upscale neighborhood. And she thought one day they would look back and laugh with each other about the night they ate Christmas breakfast at a truck stop. They would talk about the awful music. They would talk about the tacky lights. And she was sitting there staring out the window when an old Volkswagen drove up. A young man with a beard and wearing jeans got out. He walked around. He opened the door for a young woman who was holding a baby. They hurried inside and took a booth nearby. When Rita, the waitress, took their order, the baby began to cry. Neither one of the parents could do anything with the baby. So Rita reached out her arms. Sit down and drink your coffee, hon. Let me see what I can do. It was evident that Rita had done this before. She began talking and walking around the place. She showed the baby to one of the truckers, who began whistling and making funny faces. The baby stopped crying. She showed the baby the blinking lights on the window and the lights on the jukebox. She brought the little baby over to Harriet's table, and Rita said, "Look at this little darling. Mine are so big and grown." The one-armed man behind the counter brought a pot of coffee to Harriet's table. As he refilled their mugs, Harriet felt tears in her eyes. Her husband wanted to know what was wrong. She said these words. He'd come here, wouldn't he? Who? The husband said. Jesus. If Jesus were born in this town tonight, and the choices were our neighborhood, the church, or this truck stop, it would be here, wouldn't it? Her husband didn't answer right away, but looked around the place. He looked at the people. He said, "Yeah, I think so." Harriet said, "That's what bothers me. When we first got here, I felt sorry for these people because they probably weren't going home to neighborhoods where the houses have candles in the window and wreaths on the door. They were sitting here listening to this awful music, and I thought, I bet nobody here has ever heard of Handel. And now I think, more than any place I know, this is where Christmas is. But I don't belong." And as they walked to the car, her husband put his arm around her and said, "Remember, the angel said, I bring good news of great joy to all people. No matter how rich, no matter how poor, no matter what you have and what you don't, no matter how many times you mess up, no matter how many habits you can't break, no matter how many hang-ups you have, the good news is that Christ comes. He comes to us who are unworthy. He comes to us who think we are good. He comes to anyone who will welcome him in. And if we'll look, if we'll listen, we'll discover the face of Jesus all around us. And we'll understand why the writer, the prophecy, the prophet would say, "Unto us a child is born. Unto us who are unworthy. Unto us who have hang-ups upon hang-ups. Unto us who get it wrong more than get it right. Unto us a child is born, and he will be called Emmanuel." Emmanuel. What does it mean? It means God with us. Wherever we go, wherever that might be, Christmas says God goes with us. Christmas says God loved us so much that he became one of us. And the Word became flesh, dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory. Mary, did you know that your baby boy would one day walk on water? Mary, did you know that your baby boy would save our sons and daughters. Did you know that your baby boy has come to make you new? This child that you've delivered will soon deliver you. Mary, did you know that your baby boy would give sight to the blind man? Mary, did you know that your baby boy would calm a storm with his hands? Did you know that your baby boy has walked where angels trod? And when you kiss your little baby, you've kissed the face of God. And the blind will see, and the deaf will hear, and the dead will live again. The lame will leap, the dumb will speak the praises of the Lamb. Mary, did you know that your baby boy is Lord of all creation? Mary, did you know that your baby boy will one day rule the nations? Did you know that your baby boy is heaven's perfect Lamb? The sleeping child you're holding is the great I